Hi everyone, my name is Taufiq. I'm a PhD student in computer science at Virginia Tech. I'll be presenting our paper about Conversate, supporting reflective learning in interview practice through interactive simulation and dialogic feedback. Let's first start with job interview practice. As well, we know that job interviews are very important, and research has shown that mock interviews can prepare candidates better. However, not all individuals have access to career counselors for mock interview settings, and some people may not be comfortable when practicing with their peers. Therefore, industry and academia have begun to explore the potential of AI to facilitate interview practice. And currently, there are trends in using large language models for interview practice, especially coming from tech companies. However, there is still limited study on how users interact with or perceive this kind of LLM-based interview preparation. Additionally, these interview tools also share a common limitation, which is their feedback is unidirectional. Typically, at the end of an interview session, the AI evaluates the user performance and the interaction ends there. While this is still useful, but researchers argue that feedback should actively involve user in the learning process rather than just delivering assessments. So we need to find a better way to provide feedback. If we take a look at some literature from pedagogical studies, they often emphasize that for feedback to be effective, the feedback loop must be closed, meaning that the feedback is not only provided but also understood and acted upon by the learners. And one way to achieve this is through dialogic feedback. Dialogic feedback is a concept in pedagogical studies that is defined as learning about and from feedback that takes place through dialogue and involves students in interpretational meaning making about the feedback. And some studies in pedagogical literature already focuses on exploring dialogic feedback, but there is still limited study on HCI about AI-based dialogic feedback or how would users perceive this kind of human-AI interaction. And now let's talk about another important concept, which is reflective learning. The concept of reflective learning refers to critically examine self-experience to gain a deeper understanding and learn from them. And there are three key components for supporting reflections, which are explicit, social, and personal. Explicit means reconstructing an experience for learning, such as through role-playing. Then social is providing a supportive learning environment. Lastly, personal relies on learners' motivation to actively learn. Based on reflective learning and dialogic feedback theory, we developed Conversate, an AI-mediated interview practice. We leverage large language model for interview simulation, AI-assisted annotation, and dialogic feedback. And let's take a look at one by one. The first part is interview simulation, where user can do mock interview with an AI interviewer.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm the hiring manager for the software engineer position. Can you please start by telling me about yourself?
Hi, I am a computer science student with experiencing programming in Java and Python. I have completed coursework where I specifically worked on developing the backend of a tool using GPT's API, so that's something I'm proud of. And I'm looking for a position as a software engineer here.
That's great to hear that you have experience in both Java and Python, as well as tackling projects related to GPT's API. Can you tell me about a specific project that you worked on during your coursework that presented a particularly challenging programming problem and how you went about solving it?
I had challenges debugging a specific program that involved a particular game, and I was unable to finish the program.
That's understandable. Debugging can often be a significant challenge in software development.
After that, user can engage in a reflection process using the AI assisted annotation based on their interview transcript. Then user can use the Dialogic feedback feature to engage in an interactive feedback learning process. Through this feature, user can revise their answer and keep improving.
One of the bigger challenges I had in my coursework was a particular debugging issue in one of my programs where I was developing a game system. I had challenges in the implementation and I had trouble debugging a feature that I had never used before. What I learned from this experience was that I was able to collaborate with my team. Um, and although we didn't finish the program in time, I ended up a better programmer and a better debugger. During my coursework, I was developing a game system and I encountered difficult debugging issues with a feature I wasn't familiar with. Through collaboration with my team, we tried to resolve the issue and I ended up becoming a better programmer and a better debugger from experience.
And now let's take a look at the findings that consist of some of the perceived benefits and challenges when using our system. The first benefits is related to interview practice simulation with AI, which is this potentially helps users to improve through repeated practice in a low-stakes environment, as this user viewed AI as a non-judgmental machine and it makes them feel comfortable to keep practicing despite making mistakes. And even though the participants felt less pressure when practicing with AI, this doesn't negate their perception that AI is more professional interviewers than their peers. One factor that contributes to this is because the AI can ask very detailed follow-up questions that is relevant to the conversation, and this is the thing that is not usually happen when they practice with their peers. Other benefits that I want to highlight is coming from the dialogic feedback feature. This feature enables users to have personalized and continuous learning experience because this feature allows users to continue ask questions to keep advancing their response. And this feature also good if they have very specific questions that they want to ask to the AI, so it makes the learning more personalized. Another important thing is this feature also helps users to learn without feeling judged, as this user said that engaging in a dialogue with AI felt less like being evaluated and more like helping you grow. This feature also helps users to express disagreement. As we can see in this example, there is a moment where users disagree with the AI, and since it is a dialogue, users can express his disagreement. And regardless whether the feedback was correct or whether the user's opinion was valid, this disagreement made users feel that they received more relevant feedback and made them feel satisfied with the interaction. However, this type of interactions also has some consequences, which I will explain in the later slides. At some of the challenges when using AI for interview simulation. We have to consider that low-stakes environment may not fully reflect real interviews, as these users say that the AI is always positive or receptive to every answer, and this makes them feel less pressure when practicing with AI. This suggests that we should add some variability to the AI interviewer's tone, and they also suggest a human AI collaboration approach, like this example. Basically, users prefer if there is an option where they can show this tool to their friends and their friends can act as an expert interviewer by following the script on the screen like the AI follow-up questions and the AI feedback. And even though this kind of a bit deviates from our main premise, but for few people that still prefers to practice with another human, this can be a useful approach especially if their peers are not experienced enough in conducting mock interviews. The challenge that I want to highlight is coming from the Dialogic feedback feature. One of the challenges is the sycophantic behavior in large language model during the Dialogic feedback, which basically the AI tends to agree with the user whenever the user expresses disagreement, and this kind of interactions can confuse the user. Another challenge coming from the revision feature, which basically if the AI keep asking the users to continue improving, this can trigger self-frustration, especially because of the failure to meet expectations. And this kind of behavior may cause a shift from learning the core concepts to simply seeking AI approval. And now let's discuss some important points and key takeaways. First one is understanding the role of large language model in supporting reflective learning in interview practice. To understand this, we can recall back to the key components for supporting reflections, which are explicit, social, and personal. LLMs support the explicit components by providing realistic simulation, by acting as a mock interviewer that is able to generate adaptive follow-up questions. Then it can also support the social components by scaffolds the role of a mentor to support the learning process through dialogic feedback. And lastly, since the personal component relies on individuals' motivation, researchers argue that it is harder to be directly affected by technologies. However, studies suggest that this can be compensated by supporting the explicit and social components. Important point to discuss is about leveraging large language model for dialogic feedback, which can be generalized not only for interview practice, but potentially for other learning-based system as well. Basically, if we take a look at one of the benefits of dialogic feedback, it potentially reduces the feeling of judgment. And this is important because it potentially increases the acceptance and internalization of the feedback. But we also have to consider the challenges, which is the sycophantic behavior of large language model. However, considering the potentials of this kind of approach, this sort of implicates that there should be a shift towards a more dynamic and human-like interactions between users and AI systems, especially in the learning context, which basically we should shift to a dialogic feedback instead of relying to unidirectional feedback. To conduct our study to group communities, we can consider the human-AI collaboration aspect of the system. One aspect that is important is that learners are not merely recipients of information, but active agents who actively seek information for learning. And basically, we sort of emphasize this kind of concept in our system, such as through dialogic feedback and also during the annotation process. And our study provides examples that positioning humans as an active agents can potentially support the learning process. However, since control over the learning process relies heavily on the learner, maintaining learners' motivations to engage consistently in the process can be challenging. So, future work can focus on to find the balance between having learners as active agents and when they are should take more proactive role in engaging the learners in the process. And other future works includes technical evaluations of the large language model output and feedback, then also longitudinal study to measure the efficacy of this kind of systems, and lastly, it's integrating LLM-based practice alongside the conventional interview preparation. So that's all from my presentation. Thank you.